Hey everyone, Rarity Dash here. Time for another Patreon-sponsored blind reaction. And this one comes to you courtesy of SA2K, who has requested that I react to Zutara, Avatar The Last Airbender's Almost Couple, by Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy, which sounds like a fun channel. But Zutara, that of course is the ship between Zuko and Katara, and yeah, it was apparently a big deal back in the day. I mean, I kind of missed out on that whole aspect of Avatar, watching it later after the fact, and after I had already seen Korra, which is the big thing. So I kind of already knew which way it was going to go. I knew that, yeah, Katara was going to end up with Aang. But at the time, when people were watching Avatar initially, there was like this big shipping war about whether Katara would end up with Zuko or Aang. And yeah, I guess that's what this video is going to be about. I mean, the almost couple. I don't know, it never really felt... I mean, obviously, I was biased. Well, not biased. I don't really have a preference. Don't really care. But I kind of knew the answer already. Yeah, I never really saw much of anything there with Zuko. I mean, it felt... They had some good scenes together. But it never really felt like a romantic thing to the same extent as with Aang. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say what I would think if I was watching it without the information of how it ended up. But even that said, I never really felt compelled to get that far into the shipping with Avatar. At least compared to everything else I watched, pretty much. I mean, it never... I don't know, maybe just because the characters are a bit younger. I mean, I got into shipping with Korra, for sure. But with Avatar, just not as much. And, yeah. But because I wasn't really into that aspect, and I missed out on the whole Zutara thing almost entirely, that should make this video kind of interesting, just to have that kind of a perspective from people who were more invested in that, and to see just what they were seeing, I guess. I don't know. But I'm interested to find out, so let's go ahead and get this started. Here we go.
Greetings, shippers. This ship has been long requested and a long time coming.
Yeah.
It is also the winner of this month's video vote on Patreon. So if you want to get involved in helping determine content, head on over and join the vote.
Cool.
If not, no worries. Just sit back and enjoy Zutara, the pairing of Zuko and Katara from Avatar The Last Airbender. Avatar The Last Airbender was a series that ran on Nickelodeon from 2005 to 2008, spanning 3 seasons and containing 61 episodes. It was created by Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. The series was praised for its unique premise, use of not usually seen non-Western mythology and cultural depictions, as well as for being a show which, while aimed at children, tackled mature topics in a way that made it accessible not only to its core demographic, but to many outside of it, making it a series that could be watched across generations without losing its fun, cartoonish feeling. At the core of Avatar were the characters, who underwent much growth and development as the series went on, and fans developed quite an attachment to them, as well as becoming quite invested in who would be paired with who. While it could be gleaned from early on to the discerning that Katara and Aang were the eventual final couple preferred by the creative staff, many fans held out hope for another pairing. A pairing that they felt had far more chemistry, that being the relationship between waterbender Katara and firebender and initial antagonist Prince Zuko. Both were complex characters, so let's dive in. First up, Katara, a member of the small but proud Seven Water tribe. For a time, Katara was the only waterbender in her tribe and lived a peaceful life until her mother was killed in a Fire Nation raid, which forced her to grow up much more quickly. While Katara may appear to be soft, nurturing, and sweet, those are only some of her qualities. She possesses a strong sense of self and inner strength, and a maturity that manifests as a desire to help others. She is also not a saint, and has a rage at her core that she usually keeps hidden inside, but can be brought to the surface with the appropriate stimuli. She is a hard worker and does her best to learn all she can. Dedicated to her friends and a dangerous enemy, Katara still manages to maintain a sense of fun and wonder, as well as a thirst for adventure. As the series goes on, she matures considerably and hones her skills as a waterbender and as a warrior, as well as a healer. She is a truly multifaceted and nuanced character, like most in the show. Next up, we have Prince Zuko. Initially the series' primary antagonist, Zuko was never simply a cardboard villainous cutout. Growing up under the watchful eye of a cruel father, Zuko had a strong desire to prove himself worthy and be the best at all he attempted. Burdened with great responsibility and shame, he spent a great deal of time presenting the image of the person he was supposed to be over the person he wished to be. Zuko eventually gave in to his better nature with help help and encouragement from those around him, such as his uncle Iroh and eventually Aang, and especially Katara. He is a perfectionist with a quick temper, who is also loyal to his friends, though he is
Was it really especially Katara?
To be hurt emotionally.
I don't
Over
know.
the series, he develops confidence in himself and his convictions, and learns to embrace his own ideals, and joins the protagonists in their quest to restore balance and tear down the regime set up by his own
I feel like
people.
Aang had more to do
While it
with
must
it.
be drawn out of him, he has a keen
And
sense
Iroh.
of humor and playfulness, as well as a sensitivity and kindness that are kept under wraps for the most part, except for with people he trusts. So on the surface, these two have plenty of reasons to dislike each other, especially Katara, who lost her mother to the Fire Nation's oppressive regime.
Yeah.
However, the two end up canonically forming one of the strongest friendships of the series, rendered all the more beautiful by the obstacles and forgiveness required for it to be accomplished. At first, the two have a rocky relationship. Extremely rocky. Katara actively hates Zuko for threatening her friends, herself, and attempting to bribe her with her deceased mother's necklace. However, the two began to bond after he revealed that he too had lost his mother, and that they had that in common at least. Eventually, Katara came to trust him enough to attempt to heal his scar. However, his subsequent betrayal led to her hating him more than ever, and he had to work quite hard to regain her trust. However, once the wounds were healed, their relationship became one of the strongest of the series, as it was something they both had to actively work for and had to both want. They have fought beside each other, saved one another, and shared both joys and sorrows, and though they did not become a couple, there is no denying the strength of their friendship. So why ship these two? Well, the development of their relationship was a significant portion of the show, as it was a large part of showing the growth and change within their characters. As a result, the two shared many intense scenes together that fans began to gather together as evidence. More on that later. As the series progressed, the moments grew more numerous, a particular favorite being the cave sequence of season 2.
Yeah, that's one of the...
fans convinced a romance was imminent.
One of the stronger ones for sure.
3, or the instant wherein Zuko saved Katara's life, taking a hit that was meant for her. The series creators also engaged in what is known as teasing or baiting. This baiting of their fans was able to happen as at the time it was seen as an acceptable way to engage with them, as it encouraged interest in the show, and the backlash against such behavior, while it existed, was not as constant or vehement as it is at the time of this recording, as social media was not at the zenith that it is today, and attempting to bombard creators directly or actively publish articles decrying their behavior on numerous fan-based news sources were still activities waiting in the future. So while outrage was expressed, outrage culture was not what it is at the time of this recording. As a result, there was a re-airing of the series called Avatar Extras that ran on Nickelodeon that featured commentaries, and specifically in one of the episodes The Avatar Returns, it was stated that the creators intended for Zuko and Katara to be endgame. However, this was apparently a joke, and is later refuted in the commentary for Sozin's Comet, The Final Battle. In fact, interviews exist of the series creators publicly sharing their support for Katang over Zutara, with DiMartino stating, "Sorry to disappoint the Zutara fans out there, but we never intended for Zuko and Katara to get together. Maybe we're just sentimental, but we always had a soft spot in our hearts for Katang." And Konietzko added, "Zuko and Katara might have shared some sparks, but sometimes there are people along your journey of love who are there to teach you about yourself and what you really need, but don't necessarily end up being your partner. Come on, kids. Zutara never would have lasted. It was just dark and intriguing." These comments annoyed some fans, as Season 3 in particular had some strong hints towards this couple, such as the play the protagonists attend that has them paired together, a play that also addresses some of the critiques of Katang, as well as the two actually being asked if they were boyfriend and girlfriend. If the intention was for these two to never be together, these fans wondered if this was not a case of baiting in an attempt to keep Zutara fans invested and hopeful, as most shippers wish to see their chosen ship be canonically confirmed. While this most likely is baiting, it must be noted that baiting, or the will they won't they dynamic that can manifest as an acknowledgement of the fan culture known as shipping, has long been a practice of media, as there is a reciprocal relationship between viewer/reader/listener and the product. Some creators view baiting as a gift or Easter egg to the viewer, as it is a nod to a ship that they never intend to happen, hence it is not meant to be offensive or mock the shipper, but instead is meant to further include them in the process. Or it could also be a quest for views, which is part of what having a program like this on the air is all about. You have to have people watching it, and sometimes that requires playing with their expectations in order to coax them into watching. It is possible that such tactics were more accepted during this time period, where there appears to have been less of a sense of entitlement from fans towards the products they enjoy, or if the level was the same, it was harder to get the message across. However, even at that time, there were fans who did not appreciate appreciate it and felt as though they were being mocked and that their fandom should be taken more seriously. As it stands, such behavior would most likely not have been able to occur at the time of this recording, as in this day and age it is unlikely that such behavior would be able to occur without a social media blitz and angry trending hashtags.
Social media ruins everything.
Would certainly not have been as difficult to find as it was. Whether or not one views this as a bad thing depends entirely upon how one feels about metafiction, the will they won't they dynamic, and whether or not they feel that that is a justifiable way to interact with fans or a form of baiting that needs to be stopped. But back to why people ship them. Not only were they important to each other, but they grew together and encouraged a narrative of forgiveness and hope and healing. Despite what the creators say, many viewed the ship as more than dark and intriguing, although that was part of it. But others viewed it as actively possible and much more dynamic. A symbol of a union between fire and water, and potentially the dawn of a new age of hope. And it must be noted, some didn't like the idea of her and Aang, feeling he was far too immature for her and that the two had more of a sibling relationship, while her and Zuko had a passion between them, and both had matured rapidly because of the suffering in their pasts, and that this rendered them more equals, while her relationship with Aang also had a teacher-pupil element to it, which he also ended up sharing with Zuko, which made it appear that Zuko and Katara were on the same level, while Aang was not, even though he was the Avatar. Others felt that Katang felt predictable and forced, as it was so obvious. Not that Katang doesn't have its fans. It has many fans, and many merits as a ship, and there are people who do ship both. However, those fans tend to not be as outspoken. But back to the Zutarians as they were known. These fans viewed Zuko and Katara as more adult and felt that they understood each other better and knew what it meant to have to work at a relationship, and felt that they could discover how to have fun together as they helped both the world and each other heal. They felt these two inspired each other and understood each other's dark sides and wouldn't be afraid to show them to one another. There was also the fact that Katara had a slight crush on the bad boy Jet, and some felt that meant she had an attraction to such types in general, and felt that Zuko also fell into the category of an archetypical bad boy, although it must be noted there was much more to him than this. As well as the fact that they were the opposite elements of fire and water, this also translated into their color schemes of red and blue. This concept of red and blue ships actually has a following that follows this particular creative staff. Fans of this are convinced that characters with a red and blue color scheme are destined to be together, meaning Zuko and Katara, Korra and Asami, who actually were confirmed as a couple, and now Keith and Lance from Voltron, though there is less overlap creatively there than some people think. In fact, there is actually a history that marks these three that can be seen as part of why certain clan shippers are so vehement, but that is a discussion for another time. So those are some of the reasons why people ship them, so why would you not? Well, as mentioned, the two start off as antagonists for a good reason, and both have hurt the other quite extensively, and Katara has wished Zuko dead more than once. For some, the hurt done by the Fire Nation and Zuko himself to Katara was simply too much for them to imagine a romance, no matter the level of forgiveness, feeling that friendship is one thing, but building a life in the nation that killed her mother and oppressed her people is another. Some felt that the ship relied too much on the idea of opposites attracting, as they did not see many underlying similarities between the two characters, and felt that those who did were reaching, and were particularly repelled by their dissonant combat styles. Zuko being quick and explosive to anger, while Katara was a slower, deadly simmer. Some felt the aesthetics base of they look good together was shallow and frivolous. Others dismissed in-episode hints by claiming that any interactions between all characters could be read as hints, and that their moments were nothing special, which is admittedly a bit of a reach, as the creators admit to purposely including nods to this pairing. Others were fans of other pairings, as we will discuss momentarily, and felt that they would be more appropriate. And for others, shipping was never part of the equation when it came to enjoying this series.
That's probably me, that's me.
Have many shippers, but there were some fans who were just there for the story and were not active in this corner of the fan community. It is easy to forget when one is so involved that for many, shipping and this type of fandom is a completely foreign concept. This fact was actually not lost on Avatar's creators, as can be seen in the extra segment Avatar School Time Shipping, a parody short that played upon the many ships that were occurring in the fandom. It served as a fun way for the creators to acknowledge these ships, but also as an introduction for some who may not have been in the know that any of this was going on. It is this kind of engagement that can sometimes be lost because of the current outrage culture that makes it difficult for creators to participate in fandom. However, as for the fans themselves, some were put off by the intensity of the very shippers themselves. There are times when the fervor of fandom can frighten away potential shippers who are simply not that invested or do not want to get caught up in unnecessary drama, which is a large part of the Avatar fandom because, of course, one cannot talk about Zutara without discussing the massive shipping wars that was the battle between Zutara and Katang. The latter, of course, being the pairing of Katara and Aang that ultimately became canon. This ship war is one of the legendary ones,
Oh.
up there with the likes of Spuffy versus Bangel, and is often used as the example of what a shipping war is. As much of the Avatar audience was on the younger side when they engaged in these battles, there are different recollections of this time. Some remember it very fondly, and others feel that these battles got out of hand, with insults like Zutards and Avatars flying left and right, and those are some of the milder examples of what was going on. As to how far things went, not all of the evidence is readily available, as unlike these days where most fan activity is concentrated in massive archives dedicated to fan fiction, fan art, mixes, or housing fan pages, during the time of Avatar and before, much activity took place on Avatar-specific fan forums or fan sites. Many of these created and paid for by individual fans on platforms such as Angelfire or GeoCities, many of which stopped being funded and vanished over time. While some still exist, and some can still be found in archives such as the Wayback or the GeoCities archive, one has to know what they are looking for to find specific examples. From what does still exist in people's recollections, it is clear that passions on both sides were intense, and that it was largely a personality of the characters-based debate, but also one based on evidence. And people were quite serious about gathering these hints and creating long, detailed, point-by-point essays for both sides, with the goal being to legitimize their ship over the others. Fans began using certain scenes as proof that their preferred couple was endgame, and the creators of the show were not unaware of the fandom. Indeed, they have always been very aware of it, which led to the eventual accusations of pandering that would plague them on later projects. In the case of Zutara, as mentioned, this ship was acknowledged by its own narrative. All of these things, coupled with the development between all characters and their relationships with one another, led to fierce support for these and other pairings, with these two dominating. In some circles, it got pretty ugly, driving some away from the fandom, while in others, while intense, it remained manageable, and in some cases, it was all in good fun. The structure of the show was part of what helped the war gain so much traction, in the fact that neither ship was confirmed until series' end, wherein Aang emerged in the minds of Katang shippers as victorious, as Katara and Aang were the couple that became canon, as their relationship had been the more obviously telegraphed and favored. In fact, on some fan sites, the entries are written as though once Katang became canon, that was it, war over, and all of the Zutara shippers threw up their hands and slunk off into the darkness. Which was clearly not the case.
Yeah,
however, shipping was different back while this was
so.
occurring. While shipping and fanfiction as a subculture had existed since the 60s, during the Avatar period of the mid to late 2000s, fandom was still establishing itself as an online presence. And while it was secure, what and how shipping would manifest was still being negotiated, as was evidenced by situations such as this one when Katang became canon. For some, the fact that Katang was canon meant that Zutara should end, as though it was only acceptable while it was still a possibility within the show, and that the creator's voice was paramount, and that even fan works must play within the realms of canon. However, the majority of shippers felt, and do feel, that while canon can inform the framework of a piece of fiction, the whole purpose of fanfiction is to fill in what the fans perceive as gaps. So while most of the canon framework will still exist, there are of course elements that must be changed. Meaning, Zutara was never more relevant to their shippers than when it failed to become canon. And for those who shipped it, the show's Katang confirmation did not lessen their passion for Zutara, or change their opinions on the scenes they had viewed as evidence. As times have gone on, multi-shipping has become more common, and while in some ways the shipping wars have become much more vitriolic, and the attacks more personal, there is at the same time a greater understanding that both ships are acceptable and valid in their own ways, although this opinion can tend to be drowned out by the more passionate on either side of a ship. This meant that while Katang being canon makes it official and hence more legitimate, that does not necessarily invalidate Zutara in the realm of fandom. For many, while the creator is an individual to be respected and praised, that does not mean that they will cease to exercise their own creative license. While there are some who went too far and attacked the creators for choosing the wrong pairing, which showed a large sense of entitlement, as ultimately it was their story to tell. However, it is up to shippers to keep on shipping should they so choose. In short, one pair becoming canon over another does not stop shipping, nor should it, as shipping is a fan's expression of what they perceived out of the show and does not affect what becomes canon. However, a shipper should not attempt to force the ship they desire onto a show. Enthusiastic participation in fandom is one thing, harassment is another. This was another comment made on the topic of Zutara versus Katang, that the individuals involved were passionate, and because of the text-based environment of most exchanges, perhaps enthusiasm was mistaken for anger in certain cases. Although of course in certain cases it was quite obvious that that it was indeed anger. As for mistaking enthusiasm for anger, that is just speculation. These days, Zutara is the more popular of these two ships, with the most works left standing, and the most new ones being created. Even the legend of Korra and Aang and Katara's canonical children could not stop this ship, and in a fascinating way ended up reigniting it, as the knowledge that both Zuko and Katara were alive while Aang was not, led to fics of the two finding each other
Okay.
age, and finally getting
Well,
the
that's
chance to explore the perceived attraction of their youth. Nowadays, it is much more clear to fellow shippers and show creators that shipping does not stop because of what becomes canon, which can be a positive or a negative depending upon how aggressive a fandom is. For Zutara, while shipping may have slowed briefly following the series' conclusion and the reveal of Katang, it is presently still being shipped by new and old fans alike. While the passionate fire may have dimmed to a fondness as the show has long been concluded, Zutara has established itself as one of the seminal ships of fandom. The two's relationship was explored a bit more within the tie-in comics as well, as Avatar has a series of graphic novels that are considered canon that continue on from the television show. There are 4 completed trilogies: The Promise, The Search, The Rift, and Smoke and Shadow, with one final 5th trilogy being ongoing at the time of this recording, entitled North and South. If you want to know what happened to Zuko's mom, that is actually dealt with in these tie-ins. However, compared to the show, less shipping material comes out of these works, not because they are lacking in material, but because of the change in medium from television to comic. Some fans were unaware of the comic's existence, while for others, even though they are canon, the shift in medium made them feel like additional material, and not all are interested in what they view as extras. While for some, they simply did not like the change in medium, even if it was still about characters that they cared about. Everyone has different levels of fandom when it comes to works they enjoy. However, for those who did dive in, there are certain details that potentially made it into fics. There are some good fics of the two helping each other out to become better rulers. The variety in fics and art for these two is large, and there are many strong showings for shippers to enjoy. And there are still people who strongly feel they would have been the better couple. While the war may no longer wage, people still feel quite strongly towards this ship, one way or another, and there is a newfound fascination with how intense the shipping wars were, potentially because fandom has now begun to take stock of itself in a way that was previously unheard of or impossible, charting statistics and attempting to at times police itself. One can only imagine what the future holds for fandom, but one thing is certain, Zutara will definitely be a part of it. What were your guys' Avatar ships? Did you have any? Was it Zutara? Share all your thoughts down below. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all my patrons who voted to make sure this video happened. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and as always, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.
Well, that was good. That was a good video. A kind of interesting bit of perspective. I mean, I guess there are more hints looking back at it than I would have thought. I mean, there is some kind of overt stuff, kind of teases at it, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, baiting. I mean, I kind of get it if it's like a gay ship, because, I mean, yeah, you don't want to mislead like a small section of the audience there and think you're going to do something like that for them when you're not. But just teasing a ship, period, I don't think is necessarily wrong. I mean, I don't know. I mean, people can have multiple interests. I think they can, a character can be interested in one character to some extent, but then interested in another character more. I think that's fair in storytelling and normal and human. And just like different things will go to different extents, and just like feeling entitled to one ship being made canon because of some tease. I don't think that's necessarily how people should be thinking. Yeah. I don't get that. Like, I don't know. But yeah, fandom's weird today. It's like just social media, all that stuff kind of just makes it all a bit weird, which I don't know. But Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with there being like shipping wars. Personally, I mean, Zutara, it does add to an investment. I feel, and yes, someone ends up not on the right side of it. Someone a certain side does end up losing, but yeah, that's just how it's gonna be. I mean, they can't both happen. But yeah, interesting to hear about this, and interesting to kind of correlate it to other ships. And I mean, like with Legend of Korra, I know that's kind of an interesting situation. I feel it was less pandering, as was kind of suggested here, than it was just them not really knowing what they're doing for most of the shipping in that show. Like, just because and I don't think it's really even the creator's fault so much as it was on the production end, on the network end, just how much they were jerked around. And like, I mean, originally it was only going to be one season, and then it just kept getting changed, and just yeah, because of that, just the the ships got kind of messed up and overturned, and by the end of it, they just went with the one that made the most sense. At least in my my point of view, my opinion. I don't know, but I think for the most part, what I was thinking about for the majority of this video is, of course, the shipping war, the active shipping war that I've personally been the most involved in, which, of course, is the whole Bumblebee thing. And, I mean, I can definitely see a reflection there, like, especially in some of the comments I was making before, like about the sense of entitlement that because the Black Sun was teased, and it was definitely teased, that's what has to happen. And I never got that argument. I mean, it's weird. Like, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, what about any love triangle ever? Or like, just, I don't know. These things happen. There's not always going to be one option. And I don't know. Just shipping wars are interesting. But yeah, interesting video. Definitely cool to hear about this stuff. And yeah, it was presented well and kept my attention. So good job on that. Hope you enjoyed the reaction. Let me know if you did, and see you in the next one.